we actually, well, this is by say Eman, Satan, and Naps, and Hightails. Not sure if it's gonna speak later. So, so we divided this into two parts. One is the basic hacking, or more on introduction, and the part two is more on demonstration of how to do pen testing. So if you're gonna get bored in part one, or if you are actually a good hacker, you can actually skip this part. So my name is Naps, and I'm a rootcon goon. Since correction by Jamie, I started in rootcon, I think around rootcon 2 or rootcon 3. I'm not really sure. So currently, I'm working as an application security engineer in Backcrowd. So okay, so let's get started. What is hacking? Uh, the big question. So hacking is the practice of modifying the features of a system in order to accomplish a goal outside of the creator's original purpose. So actually, uh, we have multiple definition of this. According to Merriam-Webster, there are around 7 meaning of hacking, I think. So, but the ultimate purpose is actually alteration or the software or hardware. Okay, let's go to types of hackers. Script kiddies. So script kiddies are newbies. They rely on tools made by hackers. So, but don't underestimate them. Okay, so the power of the script kiddies, because these kids are actually good in using tools. So if you hand them some DOS script or some tools that they can use, who knows? They might take over the world, right? So second one is white hat. These are the good guys. As you can see, this handsome young man, uh, that's a sample of a white hat. So it's they do ethical hacking. Uh, some of them are researchers. Uh, you could see them wearing white hats or white shirts, just like this man, right? Just kidding. So, okay, let's go to the black hat. So, black hat is the classic bad hacker with a malicious intent. They usually hack just for anything, just for fun or just for uh, monetary, and I didn't add the other one. There also a gray hat. That's a mix of both of white hat and black hat. They sometimes do good. They sometimes do bad. Okay, they break into system. So okay, let's move. So most of us will always wonder or ask question, uh, where to start. So where to start, how to become a good hacker. So is there something like a map uh, or a guide? Yes, you could find it online. Or so imagine this: point A and point B. From being a script kiddie or a guy who doesn't know uh, hacking or computer, and your goal is to be a hacker and going to point B. So what you need is actually to study. You need to study a lot of things, otherwise it will be hard for you to reach your goal. Okay, ain't nobody got time for that, for studying. So the first thing you need to study or to learn or just familiarize is the fundamentals. I just created this, so I think there is more into this, but you could start into this three. So I divided in three parts. There will be other fundamentals as well. I think like hardware, but I didn't add them in the list. So first is software, and second is operating system and network. So in software, again, there are other categories, and there are more than this. I just add this three. I just put this three in the list. Uh, for example, in software, you need to learn programming or scripting, web development, or software development, and so on. So if you go into programming, again, you will see a lot of categories again. Again, this is not the complete list. These are just samples. In programming, scripting, you need to learn Bash or Bourne Shell. In Bash, most of the time, you'll be in Linux terminal or in Mac. You want to automate things, so Bash can help you a lot. So in Python, Python can help you a lot in automation too. It can help you in doing some web scraping or doing some exploit and just a simple web crawler or spider. Python can help you. So PHP, yeah, you need also to learn that. SQL, JavaScript, Java, C, and there are other languages or scripting language out there that you also need to learn. You don't need to be call this to master it all. You just need to be familiarize yourself. You could familiarize yourself in three language or in three scripting. It doesn't matter as long as you know the how to read programming or scripting. So operating systems, the second one. So Linux kernel, Windows, or Mac OS. In Linux, you need to know or to familiarize yourself in common folders, user authorization, and commands. Simple commands like move, copy, uh, and let's go to the third one, network. Protocols, you need to know the protocols. So IP addressing, UDP, TCP, etc. So there's a lot of things you need to learn in networking. You need to know what's the vulnerable ports or what's the weakness of each protocol, uh, or you should know or understand uh, the OSI layers. That's the most basic. So if you know how to build it or understand how it works, or you're familiar with these technologies, that would help you a lot. Because if you understand it, you will know how to destroy it, read it, modify it, abuse it, or secure it. So why secure it? Actually, it's also a plus pogi points, or if you know how to secure your own application or network. In this case, you know what its weakness. So imagine this red balloon is the attack surface, and you just need to defend it, and you will learn something from it. Because in just simple uh, mistake or what you call this, yeah, just a mistake, you will you can you could try your red balloon will blow up or pop up in just one single attack. So actually, it's really hard to uh, secure an application or network, because if you're an attacker, you just need to select your attack surface. It's actually big, and it's really hard to defend it. Just one simple mistake. So once you are done with the fundamentals, the software, operating system, and network, you can continue with the essentials. So I created a list of essentials, and I list down all the things you need to learn or to review or familiarize yourself. Social media. So why social media? Set up your social media to follow community of hackers or known infosec individuals. So for example, if you are in the Philippines and you are interested in bug bounty, uh, you could actually follow the bug bounty PH uh, if you're interested in bug bounty. Well, it was formed in 2017, and founder group is Jason Sabate. It's a really good group. You could find their group in Facebook, so you could ask questions, collaborate with them. So yeah, that's the first one. Uh, Set up your social media, follow the groups, or follow the other hackers, individuals, infosec individuals, professionals. You could learn from them. If they post something, it's a news in infosec. So yep, list down your references, do your own research, uh, find good materials in Google, in YouTube. Again, subscribe, like, and in Pentester Lab. Actually, this is a good lab for beginners if you want to learn some simple commands in Linux. And then Udemy, this is actually paid, but again, the best part is being free, so you should learn in searching. You could find really good articles for references and materials. So if you are into web hacking or application hacking, you could study in OAups, OAups top 10. It's really necessary if you are into web hacking. So the next one, is create your own security lab. Okay, so this one is really important because if you have a security lab, you can replicate vulnerabilities, test your skills. So set up your virtualization. For starter, you could actually download Kali Linux if you want, and then download some vulnerable by design virtual machines at VulnHub. You could install a VMware or VirtualBox for your virtualization. So yeah, this is one of the essential. So if you are a pen tester or a hacker or infosec, if you want to go to infosec career, set up your own security lab. You will need that. So third one is play capture the flag. You could try hack the backs or try hack me, or I think there's a lot of CTF out there you could find in the web. It's really good to test your skills by playing capture the flag. So you may join contests or you could play your own. You could also read CTF walkthrough and just replicate it. Since you're a beginner, you could actually replicate it and check how is it done. So even if you read it, uh, you will learn a lot of things in replicating CTF walkthrough. I think Jay Turla created a CTF walkthrough in GitHub for rootcon CTFs. So check that out. It's actually good. But just remember, don't always read CTF walkthrough if you want to be serious or if you want to play the game, just to test your skills. Okay. So third one is third in essentials is documentation. It's really important for a hacker or an infosec individual to document and take notes of the vulnerabilities, commands, or your target. So there's a multiple application for note taking. There is OneNote, Juplin, Evernote, or Cherry Tree. I'm not sure if you are aware with this. I'm using these three, Cherry Tree and Juplin and Evernote. Evernote's good. It's in the cloud, and Juplin, this one's really good. Actually, I'm currently using it, so this is just a sample of Juplin. So it's a hierarchy note. So if you encounter a commands or a vulnerability that you want to document, it's really good to have it documented. Not unless you are genius like this guy. Okay. So next one, go to hacker conference. Or if you can't go to a hacker conference, you could always watch replays talks in YouTube for free. That's the best thing. It's free. So what are the hacker conference in Philippines? We have RootCon. The founder is Semprix. Okay. So if you live in north of the Philippines, that is good. You could meet Mars Cacacho is the founder of Hack the North. And Hack the North was formed in 2014. So you could actually check that out. You could go there and yeah. And if you have money and visa, you could go to DEF CON. Or you could watch it for free, again, in YouTube. So that's really good. Okay, so next essentials is do bug bounty hunting. So mhm, you could join Bugcrowd or HackerOne. There is a lot of I think yes we have bug bounty platform out there. Just Google it and imagine you could hack something legally and you could receive recognition or sometimes compensation for the bug reports or security exploit and vulnerabilities that you reported. So imagine that you're testing your skills and you're being paid. Isn't that cool? So for bug bounty, for example, you could start bug bounty when you know the difference between HTTP and HTTPS. So if ever you found a login form, mhm, a login form that is actually using an HTTP and not HTTPS, you could actually report it just by knowing the difference of HTTP and HTTPS. And that is under networking, right? So if you know the common protocols and vulnerabilities of the protocols, that is under networking, and networking is the fundamentals. So again, if you saw a login page and you could actually brute force it, and that is again an issue, you could report it. However, be mindful of the scope of the program brief in bug bounty. So in background, we do accept it if you could actually send multiple request attempts, and after that, a successful login, just to simulate a real-world brute forcing. It uh, it may be accepted or not. So that's why there's a chance if you could actually brute force. But don't brute force it if you don't have a valid credentials. Okay? Because you need a successful login just to simulate the real world brute forcing. Okay? It may be accepted. So, I know, you know, this kind of page, when you see this in an application or web application, this is again an issue. You could report this. This is PHP info, and this is used for debugging PHP applications and just to check your configuration PHP. So if you again, if you found something like this, try to report it. Now, again, it is where's my mouse? Under the fundamentals, which is software, because you are familiarized. I mean, you are familiar with PHP info. Okay, so if you see something like this, so what do you think this is? What kind of vulnerability might exist here, right? So this is a sample of directory traversal, and you could test it right away without a tool if you want. Just add this character ///////// etc slash passwd or shadow. So uh, because directory traversal is madalas it's common in uh, downloading PDF files. So if you saw something like this, you could try this, or you could actually try it. Try it. It's better if you use a tool. But since you know it, you could actually try it manually. So again, this is under fundamentals, which is software. Because you are familiar with this kind of setup, uh, if there's a parameter and then there's a resource of a PDF here, that's an issue that might exist. Might exist. Okay, it might be an issue or not. So why operating system? Because of the common folders. You know the common folder. Okay. I think directory traversal is really, the price is really high for the rewards in bug bounty. So the next one. Okay, so if you want to start in bug bounty, you could search for, I think, bug bounty methodology by Jason Haddock's really good. You could check it out in YouTube. Okay. So again, next is get a certification. You could get OSCP, CH, EJPT, and Pentest Plus. I know one of you doesn't want CH, but some will say CH is not good. Well, if you are a beginner, again, this is hacking 101. You can still learn a lot from this certification. Just remember, don't read the dumps, the dump tests, and review the course content. Don't cheat yourself, okay? So if you have money and time, go for it, or go directly to OSCP, or EJPT is really for beginner, but it's good. The content is really good. And Pentas Plus. I think Pentas Plus is, yeah, could actually check it out. There's a lot of certification out there that could actually help you. Even CCNA, some will say, CCNA is for noobs. Nah, yes, it's for noobs, but you're attending Hacking 101 because you're a noob, right? Okay. So it will still help you a lot in learning something. Okay. So ISCP is really good because it's really hands-on. So next is secure yourself. Securing yourself is one of the essential because you can be hacked. You can be hacked and you don't want it. So you could install VPN, set up your firewall, if you have your own server. So if you are securing yourself, you are actually learning something. You are learning security, and that is good. That is essential uh, to familiarize yourself. And yeah, next is study how to use hacker tools. Okay, so learn to use hacker tools. It's, yeah, this is big brain time. See this guy? If you use inspect element, actually, you could hack something if you use inspect element. It's, again, it's really good to use inspect element. Really, could hack something. So OAuths and burp suit, this is good. And Zap is good. Metasploit, you should know how to use SQL map, John the Ripper, Nmap, Wireshark, and this kitty. You will need to study this kitty because you will uh, use it a lot. That again. So yeah, learn to use hacker tools. That's one of the essential. Just to automate your stuff and make it easier for you to lessen the time of hacking. So there's a lot of tools out there. There's a tons. You could actually check it out. What's the beginner tools? Well, for me, I use when I was college, I used Kane and Abel. Just uh, well, just for fun. So I guess you already know the answer, right? Or where to start is to study. So study all those things. Uh, Familiarize yourself, and by doing so, it will help you. So again, this is the software, operating system, network. This is again the fundamentals. And there is a lot of more fundamentals out there. So this is essential social media reference materials. Capture the flags, UTF documentation, and etc. These are the essentials that you need to do and familiarize yourself. This is just a small box. So imagine this. So that's the fundamentals and essential I mentioned. It's just a tip of the iceberg. And there's actually more of the fundamentals and essentials that you need to do. And the most important is to be a hacker is think out of the box. Don't limit yourself from what I just said. It's just a guide that will work or not work on you. Okay? Just a small guide. But again, if you're going to just so the simple where to start from A to B is actually more complex than you imagine. Okay? So this is actually the point A to point B. From being a non-hacker to a hacker, it's really complex. So imagine the blue circles is actually some of the fundamentals and essentials or technologies that you need to learn or familiarize yourself. You could actually start from being a non-hacker or a script kiddie. It's not an issue if you start being a script kiddie. You could actually skip the fundamentals. See this? It started penetration testing. And it's still okay. Don't shame yourself. Don't It's okay if you started it to do a penetration testing directly. But I promise you, if you don't learn the basic or the fundamentals of software OS networking, you will have a problem later on. So That's the thing you need to do. You need to start software, to study software, operating system, and network, and essentials. So it's okay to do this, but it will be hard for you to be successful. But again, it's better than doing nothing. But if you want, if you are a YOLO boy, you could do penetration testing without learning those basic skills if you want to. So, shifting your career path to information security. So these are the job roles when you go to an infosec or a hacker job roles. You could be a security analyst, security engineer, security architect, security administrator. Lahat may security sa unahan. Yan. No. Just kidding. Lahat. All of this, and there are a tons of job titles out there that you will see uh, that is into hacking or hacking or an information security job. So learn, if you want to shift your career to be an infosec professional, learn your strength and weaknesses first. So okay, if you are weak in network, you could study network. If you are weak in software, you could study software. You don't need to master it. You just need to familiarize it. Okay? So in shifting your career, this is your comfort zone right now, and the magic happens here. It's really big. So I believe in this, where the magic happens. Sometimes you have to take a risk so to get what you want in order to get out of your comfort zone, just to get what you want. So that is exactly what I did when I shifted my career. So I started being a web developer before I shift my career into an infosec realm. So because first I know how to program, my skill set is mostly on software, and I have a little bit of operating system because I manage some servers. I was given a chance to have my first security job, which is SaaS consultant. SaaS is static application security testing. So when I am a SaaS consultant, we do test application code if it's safe or not. So that's what I do. So SaaS is like white is actually a part of white box testing approach wherein we do check the code. We can see it in we can see it. Wherein the black box testing or the penetration testing is doing this, they don't know or they don't see the code. So that's the difference between white box testing and black box testing. You could see it internally. They could the client could give the code and we check it. So that's it. So after SaaS consultant, I was given a chance to work as a penetration testing. But before that, when I was a SaaS consultant, since I want to be a penetration tester, I know my weakness, which is mostly network. So what I did is I familiarized myself, and I take a simple certification just to familiarize myself in network. I created my own network at home and create a honeypot, something like that. So after that, since I know the network, I studied penetration testing, and then I tried to be a penetration tester. And currently, I am an application security. Uh, so as an application security engineer in background, we do replicate and study hacker reports. So that's it. That's my adventure in InfoSec. Okay. So InfoSec professionals that became an entrepreneur. So these guys are really amazing. Imagine you could be a hacker and an entrepreneur at the same time. Being a hacker or an InfoSec professional is actually time consuming. Being an entrepreneur can also be time consuming as well. So I can't imagine how these guys uh, became an entrepreneur since they are currently they are actually a hacker or infosec professionals, and I salute these guys for being great. uh, First is we have Raymond Nunez. So guys, just check his profile in LinkedIn. He is a doctor of computer science, and look at his certification. Most of it is GIAC. Lahat ng GIAC nandyan na ata eh. GIAC, GIAC, GIAC. So, he is the founder of Red Rock IT Security. So, their company specializes in services such as compromise, assessment, managed detection, and response. So, may white box testing din sila and black box testing. All box ata test din sila like yellow box, green box na joke. Just white box and black box testing. Andiyan na sa kanila. So, ayun, doctor din siya ng computer science, lahat. Lahat na. Nandiyan na. Actually, kasali si Doc Mons sa Mr. Pogi ng 1997, 1998, I think kasabayan niya si Jericho Rosales. Okay? So next one is Alan J. Dumanhog. Paalam ako sa mga to. Second one is Alan J. Dumanhog, known as Atom. He founded Secuna when he was 21 years old. So imagine at such young age, he managed to create his own business, a business which is focused in cybersecurity. And that's it. At the same time, still do hacking. Secuna is a bug bounty platform, just like HackerOne or BugCrowd, I think. So it's local in the Philippines, but I believe some of his clients are actually foreigners. Probably because of the dollar sign of the pricing. So just a guess. So yeah, Atom, great guy. So third one is Mark Christian, Secretario. He is OSCP and OSCE. He founded Guide M on 2019. Guide and specialized in cybersecurity training. So these guys, yan. So I really can't imagine talaga these guys can actually create their own cybersecurity companies. So these three guys are actually just in the Philippines. We have multiple companies and hackers, founders that of cybersecurity companies. internationally, like Kevin Mitnick and H. Timor. So, my apologies pala sa mga hindi ko nabanggit. Marami ako nakausap pero di ko nalagay. So guys, what do these guys have in common? They're all wearing black shirt and cross arm pose. So we should also wear black shirt and do the cross arm pose in order for us to be a hacker and entrepreneur at the same time. Just kidding. Well, I think they have the passion and dedication in cybersecurity. That's why they also built their own cybersecurity companies. So, if you have passion and dedication and in hacking, you might be the next hacker or a good hacker entrepreneur at the same time. So that's it for part 1. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you have questions, just post it, send it. Okay, bye. So we'll be going to part 2. Yeah.
Hey,
Go on,
Naps,
Jam.
before you say goodbye, is this the last part of your slide?
Yeah, this is the last part of my slide. We have, I think, yeah, it's a last part. So, Eman
Don't
is
say good.
next.
Don't say goodbye too quick.
No, no.
It's really amusing though. Anyways, for those who are listening in our webinar, if you do have questions, because we've been looking at the question and answer portion of the Zoom webinar, and we haven't seen much of the questions. Please feel free to ask the questions over the question and answer portion of the webinar. You could just raise a hand or something. So here we've got one. Are you going to provide a copy of this webinar after this? Yes, we will. Uh, you'd get the details. You could just send us a message over Discord and we'll provide you the details on where to find the recording. That Jason validated the question of sino po yung naka-white kanina na white hacker. I could not disclose. They prohibit me to disclose, but if you are a frequent attendee of RootCon, you'd know who he is. And then, seriously, how to become Docmon? There's only one Docmon in the world. So, how to become like him? It's best that you ask him personally. Naps, do you have an answer for that? How to become Docmon now?
Hello? Yeah. You could
Yes.
you should join first Mr. Pogi in Itbulaga pero wala na atang Mr. Pogi now.
Anyhow, if we don't have questions coming in, you could still put in your questions for a little bit later. We'll still have naps for the rest of the hour. He'd still be dialed in. We could answer those questions for you. He'd be happy to do that. And then, if nothing else, let's start on with the bit that's coming from Eman. Eman, take it away.
Right. So let me share my screen real quick. Right. So the second part of this talk is actually pen testing 101. So we started with hacking 101. Now this is going to be a more technical bit of the talk. Right. So pen testing 101, as we all say, penetration good. Right. So this is my table of contents for what's going to be shown. So a table of contents would be penetration testing. So what is penetration testing? Penetration testing versus vulnerability assessment, how to differentiate one from the other, an in-depth on some vulnerabilities, methodologies, and technologies that are currently out and about. Next would be tools and the penetration testing approach. I have a bonus bit here, but you know, it's a surprise for everyone. It's just going to be a small bit. Okay, so starting off, chapter 1. So what is penetration testing? So based on definitions from all around the internet and numerous security consultants and such. So penetration testing, also called pen testing or ethical hacking, is the practice of testing a computer system, network, or web application to find security vulnerabilities that an attacker could exploit. So, in line with the images, yes, you know pen testing because you know how to find for vulnerabilities, and you know what to do to take advantage over these vulnerabilities. So you exploit the systems to gain, total control, partial control, or get information regarding your target. So next, the goal for penetration testing is to identify weak spots in an organization's security posture, as well as measure the compliance of its security policy, test the staff's awareness of security issues, and determine whether and how the organization would be subject to security disasters. The penetration test can also highlight weaknesses in a company's security policies. For instance, although a security policy focuses on preventing and detecting an attack on an enterprise system, that policy may not include a process to expel a hacker. So they may, usual companies or some companies have a security methodology or security compliance plan in line, but they usually leave out the probability of them getting hacked, especially for small businesses, etc. This is very prominent because they mostly think that we're a small business, no one's going to target us, no one's going to get any money from us. We're not even in the X price range or X net worth to be worth a target. So that's where they're wrong. Hackers or black hat hackers usually target whoever can be targeted. Whether you're a normal person, you own a company, they don't choose. So as long as you're vulnerable, they can expedite their skills or they can train their skills on your live machine. They will do it. Not all. Note the emphasis on black hat hackers. Okay. So next chapter would be an in brief how to differentiate penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. So usually when you say penetration testing, it's always bundled with vulnerability assessment, as with most security providers do. They call it VAPT, but they are actually pretty different. So a lot of people think that these two are the same. So when they say vulnerability assessment, you agree to a proposal, etc. They usually go, why did you not exploit the vulnerability? And then security provider goes, but you didn't ask for a pen test. So that's where they usually the lines get blurry, etc. It gets complicated. So for one, vulnerability assessments, number one is identify vulnerabilities that are present in the system. This involves also mostly the use of automated tools to analyze the target machine or target system to be considered in scope and may not be backed with actual exploitation. Also, vulnerability assessments may include false positives. So, vulnerability assessment is not penetration testing. So penetration testing is the same vulnerability identification. It also has dedicated tools or exploits that you can use. You actually attempt exploitation on the target, and you have to give proof of concepts. Okay, so for penetration testing, a proof of concept is basically the keys to the kingdom. You can't perform or you can't submit a formal penetration testing report without the proper proof of concept that you did exploit the system. Because otherwise, when they ask for proof, you won't have any. That's why this is backed by attempted exploitation, because when it fails, it means that you did not leverage the vulnerability right, or you were not able to leverage the vulnerability due to other factors such as them having a firewall, etc. So these are actually pretty different, as you can see. So mostly vulnerability assessment and penetration testing have a fine line between, because they are similar, right? They're similar because they both identify vulnerabilities. So that's where usual companies have a bit of confusion. In any case, we move forward. So next would be an in-depth on some vulnerabilities, methodologies, and technologies. Okay, so a vulnerability, right? So vulnerability is actually defined by some organizations very differently. So we have here from CERT, or the Computer Emergency Response Team, NIST by HackerOne. So for the Computer Emergency Response Team, we consider a vulnerability as a software defect. For bug bounty platforms, they consider it as software bugs. For Microsoft, it's a weakness. And for NIST is a weakness in logic. And for ISACA, it's a weakness in design and implementation. So for Microsoft, it's a weakness in the CIA of an application. It's the CIA is an application's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So knowing that these are the different definitions of a vulnerability, some vulnerability examples include the most common one and the most, everyone here or every experienced hacker here that does bug bounty or pen tests, if you actually get a successful remote code execution vulnerability exploited on your target, you are pretty much happy, because for bug bounties, they offer a huge reward for this, because this is basically the keys to the kingdom. This is basically your foot on the door to a full takeover. So for example, remote code execution, this is a sample of remote code execution on a vanilla PHP server. So this is the payload, echo shell exec get cmd. So what it does is the PHP renders this as a PHP file and then executes a CMD instance. So basically, the CMD is the command that was supplied, and you did it via remote because you had you just sent this over to the PHP server that you targeted. So remote code execution works like this. So we have a client and a server. So the client sends a GET request to, for example, index.php cmd equals date. So this is pretty outdated, but this is the most simplest example of a remote code execution that I can give. So for example, you issued a request to the website and then it renders a PHP. For example, index.php, since earlier you saw the PHP file, it includes the CMD being invoked. So afterwards, you just query CMD is equal to date. And then it gives you the date command from the CMD. So the server responds with the output from the terminal, which is the date. Now, what if you issued a different command? So you issued CMD dir. So in Windows, dir is the counterpart of ls in Linux because it lists the directories and files that are in the current or the present working directory. So if we try to do a dir or dir command, it returns these example files. So these are currently in, as you can see earlier, var www html. So basically, what the server returned is the other contents of the HTML directory. Right, so this is also an example of remote code execution. As you all know, I believe, a few years back, there was a really in the wild exploit for Drupal. So this was Drupagadon 2, I think. Yeah, it's Drupagadon 2. So this was way back around 2017 and 2018. So this is the exploit or the automated exploit tool where you just, specify the target and then it checks for the vulnerability present, automatically exploits it, and automatically starts a shell afterwards. So notice that uh, the method of this tool to check for the remote code execution vulnerability is the echo string. So echo, as you all know in commands or Linux, if you're familiarized in Linux or PHP, echo is has similarity with print. So he tried echo a random string and then it got the result or the response from the HTTP or from the server with the same string. So therefore, it actually verified that the vulnerability is present. So the tool actually uh, makes a shell or executes a shell afterwards, but we didn't need to include that. Right, so another vulnerability example is also a common vulnerability with a lot of types. So this one is denial of service via resource exhaustion. So what we have here, what you're looking at, is a Java applet that is not English. All right, so this Java applet shows a map. So this is downloadable. This is easier to reverse engineer or decompile. So when you decompile the Java applet, you'll get this. So there's an initialization of a variable. Most usually, bug bounty hunters or penetration testers would get uh, the hunch to reverse engineer if your content is downloadable. So for this example, the data type is void. So he declared something here is an integer declared as until cartoon. Right? So if you translate that, you'll get the hang of it. I mean, you'll actually see that it's a variable related to the map loading, right? So either way, you'll see a for loop afterwards that says the new cart or K1, since K1 is used in the for loop afterwards, and this just adds an image, appends again and again. This loop is not exiting unless a condition is not fulfilled. So what if you change the value from the global variable setup to 10 million? So if K1 is actually based on the integer variable of the variable Ansel carton right here, which is 10 million, it would run the loop 10 million times. So eventually, when you start the Java applet, you're going to get 100 CPU usage because it's still running and it's doing something in the background that doesn't end. So it's basically stuck in an, not infinite, but who the hell waits for 10 million iterations to finish? So when you track the application, so you'll see that 98% of the CPU usage is in the Java launcher or the Java applet that is involved. Basically, when you reach to 100, the server shuts down, or this is basically what happens. So when you edit or you did that and successfully uploaded it in the web server for everyone to download, basically remote users access the web servers. They want the map to be shown, right? So if the attacker successfully injects the 10 million value on the global declaration after his reverse engineering phase, the web server gets a heavy load. So for everyone that accesses it, they're going to get whatever we got earlier, which is 100% CPU usage or 99% CPU usage, because as we said earlier, the applet was downloadable. So basically, this was a denial of service by resource exhaustion because nobody can access the web server afterwards because it was overloaded. So those are just some vulnerabilities. There are numerous vulnerabilities there. There are numerous CVEs or classifications also that are in different part of different methodologies. So in bug bounty, the most common ones usually around are server-side template injections, server-side request forgeries, local file inclusions, information disclosure. So there are a lot. So these vulnerabilities, they can all be classified when you actively look for them. You just have to, know how to use Google. Not just Google. If you have friends who have different specialties, for example, web application security, network security, etc., they also know about common vulnerability classifications and how to classify vulnerabilities when you're doing a pen test. So you can ask them. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to dive in. Whatever material or whatever course that you've seen on the internet that has good reviews, that actually teaches you things, because believe it or not, none of us would want to spend most of the time on a single course and then at the end we realize that the course was short-handed. So at most we want the maximum efficiency of our time. So when you study, always check for the reviews. If you have a friend that personally took them, then why not ask them? So next up would be common tools. So these are just some tools that I've seen and I've been using most prominently, because for one, I have been specializing in network pen testing. So some of these tools are outdated, some are still viable, so bear with me. So Nmap, first thing to actually be knowledgeable in using is Nmap, because in every penetration test, you need information on your target. Right, so Nmap, this is the sample of Nmap. I'm pretty sure most of you here have uh, done or have seen this particular tool in action. So Nmap is usually Nmap plus options, and then you specify the IP address, and then it shows you the open ports. Sometimes it can also show you the OS fingerprint details. It also shows you the services that are running and version if possible. Next would be Netcat. This is viable, and this is the usual go-to for usual machines. If you don't use a CNC server, basically this is your go-to tool to establishing a shell or a, we'll get to that in the next part. Hold on. So Netcat is a terminal tool also, like in most tools in Linux. So in Netcat, this is your kind of ace in penetration testing, because this is what you'll mostly use when you're going to establish a listening port on your computer, so that when you instruct your payload, it'll connect to your IP and on the port that is issued. So there are two types of shells that are prominently used in the industry. So first is the bind shell. So how a bind shell works is there's a target and then there's an attacker. So the attacker sends the exploit to the target, and then it opens, for example, the exploit contains an instruction that opens port 4444 and serves cmd.exe. So the target initializes a listening port on port 4444, which has cmd.exe bound to it. So the target now then executes, and then the attacker connects via port 4444. So target is basically the IP address of the target, and then 4444 is the port that we specified in our payload. So this is a bind shell. Notice how everything is sent from the attacker. The target is just there, open, and then opens a specific port that most likely only you know. I said most likely because there are tons of hackers there, and if it's a public facing server, you never know who's targeting it. So the next type of shell is the reverse shell. Right, so like the bind shell, we also have a target and an attacker. Okay, so in the reverse shell, this is an example earlier. So the attacker is the one that opens the listening port. So the attacker opens port 4444 and starts listening. And then the attacker sends the exploit. The exploit code contains a connection to port 4444 on the attacker's IP and serves cmd.exe or bin/sh if it's in Linux. So the target is the one that connects back. So now you get why it's reversed, because the target is the one that connects, not the attacker. Right, so these are two of the most prominent shells that are used in network pen testing, sometimes in web pen testing, but in web application security, they usually have these so-called web shells where it has a graphical user interface for everyone, etc. It's easier to use. You can actually serve whatever you want if you successfully gain root privileges to the system that you're targeting. Right, so next would be derb. Derb is kind of deprecated nowadays because derb number one is very noisy when it comes to intrusion detection systems, firewalls, so it can be easily detected. Why is this here? You never know. The tool might come in handy sometime soon or whatnot. So derb is a directory buster. The alternative, if you don't want to use derb, there are tons of new iterations nowadays like GoBuster or dirsearch, etc. So derb brute forces different directory paths in the web page or in the web server that you specify or the domain that you specify. Next would be SQL Map. As Naps mentioned earlier, SQL Map is a automated tool to check for SQL injection vulnerabilities, and if it successfully detects one, it will attempt to exploit, so you'll gain not instantaneous, you have to wait for a while sometimes, but you'll gain access to it eventually if it's vulnerable. Next is Hydra. Hydra is similar to John the Ripper, etc., because it's also a brute forcing tool. It's also a cracking tool. So, for example, here, Hydra is pointed at the HTTP post form, which is the HTTP box or hack the box machine mischief that has a web page open, so the port is 80 and the other parameters are login.php user, and then user password identification variables are used so that Hydra can detect which fields he's going to input credentials in. So you'll see the tries, the estimated time that's displayed, whether he'll be done in a bit, etc. And then in the end, you can see that he actually returns positive results that are detected. So when he got the password, he displayed it in a green highlight that says the password is trickery and deceit. And then after a while, he noticed that the login was administrator. So basically, this is a password spray, trying different username and password combinations, etc. And later on, he discovered that login was administrator and the password is triggered in deceit. So next, if you're just trying out things and don't have, a dedicated budget, you can try OpenVAS, because OpenVAS is a vulnerability assessment scanner. So this is similar to most products right now, like Qualys, Nessus, Tenable, What else? Akinetics or whatnot. I'm not sure if I left out any major scanners, but this is basically an open source scanner. So this is involved in every distribution of Kali Linux. You just have to set it up first for the database to be created, etc. So this is actually a pretty good tool because the vulnerabilities are updated every now and then. But then, the reason why we have paid things is because, well, not all paid things are good, but you're paying for something that open source doesn't have. Next would be Burp Suite. So Burp Suite is the typical go-to of web application security enthusiasts. They usually buy because Burp Suite is kind of the Swiss Army knife in web application security. So you have your target, you have your proxy, you have your intruder, repeater, sequencer, and it has, if you have the paid version and not the community version, it has tons of extensions that you can install in your Burp Suite instance that can help you in testing a specific application or a specific backend of an application. So these tools or these extensions are made by renowned security researchers all over the world. So if you manage to get an idea to make an extension, then you can just create one and then submit it to Burp. It'll be added to the B App Store if it's reviewed afterwards. Next, for this one, if you fiddled with usual networks and Active Directory setups, Responder is a pretty nice tool to have. So Responder was made by the guys at Trustwave, if I'm not mistaken. So it's NBTNS, LLMNR, and MDNS Responder. So you basically have the vulnerability that is LLMNR and or NBTNS poisoning prominent in most Active Directory setups or most Windows networks. So Responder is a pretty nice tool to catch the requests going on about in the current network, and it's a pretty nifty tool because you can actually fetch NTLM v2 or v1 hashes with it. So what you do when you get these hashes, you'll save it for later because later on there's actually a tool to crack those. So next would be Metasploit. Of course, the hacking arsenal would not be complete with Metasploit. That's why we have the terminology Metasploit kitties, which have been around for a while. Metasploit is actually an exploitation tool. So it hosts a lot of exploits, a lot of payloads, a lot of auxiliary scanners that penetration testers can use to check if the vulnerability is present and then later on exploit it. So you don't have to code your own exploit, etc. If the exploit is readily available, then most likely it also has a Metasploit module. Not all of them have a Metasploit module though. Next would be Wireshark. So of course, in your penetration testing engagements, you wouldn't want to take the blame if you break something intentionally. So if you break something intentionally, that's a given because it's a penetration test. But if it seemingly breaks while you're performing a pen test, you don't have any captures or you don't have any logs to save your behind from getting roasted by the upper management. So Wireshark, on my usual network pen tests, I use Wireshark, and from the start of the pen test to the end, I just leave it on and it's on autosave so that uh, if the time comes that an additional service breaks while I'm doing my pen test, but I didn't fiddle with it, I have proof that I can show that I was not sending things to the service or to the mentioned service. So yeah, Wireshark also has a lot of uses. If you can also use it for MITM attacks if they don't have SSL enabled, etc. So earlier I mentioned responder, and most probably the question in your thoughts was, what am I going to do if I get if I get hashes? So Hashcat is one of the most used tools in password cracking, especially for pen testing, not just pen testing, for CTFs, etc. But for this, usually the more powerful your PC is or computer is, the better, because it's going to crunch numbers in a quicker amount of time. So Hashcat is my number one go-to for a lot of hashes and a lot of password attacks. So next is Mimikatz. Mimikatz it has a lot of uses actually, but it's mainly targeted on Windows. So Mimikatz is used for sometimes the admin rights, privilege escalation, etc. Okay, so next would be this is kind of outdated, but since multiple pen tests aside, etc., Powersploit and Empire still work on numerous machines till now. So it's deprecated. If you're going to visit their GitHub page, then it's going to state that the Empire repository is deprecated already and it's not being maintained, but it still has a lot of tools in its arsenal. Empire was looked down upon because it made so much noise in the security monitoring tools, and if you have a formal engagement with the company, so that's why it's being frowned upon on other companies, because they can easily detect if you're trying to do something to the system. So after those consolidation of tools, etc., so we have the usual penetration testing approach. So for you to be an actual hacker, man, you have to stick, or you have to have a methodology that always works in general. You may have to alter some bits and pieces every now and then, but you need to get your methodology straight. So for me, I personally use this methodology. So I start always with information gathering. Who doesn't, who doesn't gather information before they send out an attack? That's basic. You have to know a lot of things about your target before you actually start everything. So from information gathering, you actually check the domains, the services, ports open, and from there, when you actually find something interesting, you can look deeper into it and then proceed to vulnerability identification. So identify which vulnerabilities you can leverage, in afterwards comes exploitation. So if you successfully exploit the vulnerability, then comes post-exploitation, which is persistence or maintaining access, and privilege escalation So all of these come into post-exploitation practices. And then lastly, you have to do your reporting because, of course, you're not going to pen test on just any server. You're doing a pen test because the company hired you to, or the organization hired you to. Basically, this is a legal pen test. That's why it's it has reporting at the end. So for me, this is my typical go-to for penetration testing methodologies. This doesn't change, although in some situations there are bits and pieces added, but those are entirely um, entirely up to the scenario. So if it's just the usual pen testing scenario, I stick to these five as much as possible. I gather most information and then identify vulnerabilities, try for exploitation. If I show success in exploitation, I try to leverage. I try to escalate my privileges. I try to exfiltrate data, etc. I try to maintain access, and then I'll have a client that is happy with my report. So a sample for this is number one. So information gathering, if it's probably a network pen test, etc. Let's say that it is. So for example, here I have a local machine that I set up. So I used Nmap to enumerate the services and ports that are open on the specific IP that I stated. So I saw that other than port 514, there is port 80, which is running an Apache server. So as we all know, if it's running port 80, then if it's also running Apache, then it's a web server. So it might have a web page. Looking at the web page, etc., after serious digging over, you'll realize that this web page is in Drupal. So Drupal has its changelog.txt. If it's available, then it's a jackpot. See, you'll be able to fingerprint the specific Drupal version. So right here it says that it fixed some security issues from way back 2016. So it means that it's not patched, because for me, I have knowledge that there is a new out and about vulnerability for Drupal that gives me a remote code execution, or that leverages a remote code execution vulnerability. So after some ample searching, you'll see Apache 2.22 site exploit DB. So you can see a lot of exploits uh, that were mentioned. So a lot of exploits in Apache, the Apache version, etc. And then if you dig through the Drupal version, you'll see that this one is released in 2018. So 2018, since the last patch was 2016 on the server, we might try to leverage this certain vulnerability that was found. So right here you hit the jackpot because fortunately there's an exploit for it already. So then you run the exploit, or you can create an exploit yourself and try to leverage the vulnerability, but for time's sake, because every penetration test is mostly has a time constraint, you'll use whatever is readily available. If it's not, then you have to resort to creating your own exploits, creating your own payloads. You need to study the system more, etc. So remote code execution a screenshot goes through, and then we proceed to post exploitation. So after post exploitation, you'll see that you'll listen on the attacker machine is currently listening on the 443 port. Then from the remote code execution earlier, we pointed the vulnerable machine to connect to the attacker machine. So after that, we have a interactive shell established, but then we still have a problem. So when we navigate through the documents, etc., we can see that we don't have the necessary permission. So post exploitation comes here, because earlier I mentioned that post exploitation includes the privilege escalation. So since we are running an interactive shell, we do a bit of information gathering again. So what else is there on the server? What build is it running, etc.? What kind of Linux machine is it? So after we get the significant information from it, we try to use Google again. So after using Google, we stumble upon a local privilege escalation exploit that is published in the exploit database. So if this is if the versions match and if the conditions match, this will surely go through. So we try to compile, give it the privileges on the executable one, on the executable and the compiled exploit. And then later on, we see that when we run the exploit, we are suddenly root. So we escalated the privileges from www or whatnot to the most highest user group in a Linux distribution, which is root. So from there, import documents, you do exfiltration of data, etc., and you can try to chain multiple findings, because believe it or not, if it's a network pen test, then if you suddenly get a shell on, for example, an admin's computer, he might have other information about other computers that you can also try to take over, and then it'll also add in your report. Okay, so the technical side is basically done. For newcomers or for infosec enthusiasts that have an interest or that show interest in uh, what I need to do, what I need to study, etc., I'll go through that later. For people with in the industry or new to the industry that are planning to, if you have the time and money, why not? This is a certification roadmap that is covering most of the fields in security. So if you're in implementation, then the one you want to start with the ones in the bottom, work your way up to top. You don't have to necessarily get all of these, but if you have the time and the money and you're planning a roadmap for yourself, then this can be a helpful guide that can jumpstart you on what you need to know. So certifications aren't there for pay raises, etc. Certifications are there for you to gauge yourself on what you know. Although this doesn't work on everyone, because I've known lots of people, they don't even have certification, but they're pretty good in what they do. So certifications is not a way for you to determine that you're superior or you're inferior to someone. These are just there for you to use them as a baseline on what you currently know, probably. And then you can study, take the exams. If you pass, then you move on to the next stage. So for me, for penetration testing, of course, you want to look in the offensive operations section. So for penetration testing, we have uh, multiple certifications that are there. Um, Most of the people I know start with it's either EJPT and CH, or they skip these and study a little bit longer by themselves and then head on to OSCP and uh, CRT, or take it to the next level afterwards, which is OSWE, OSCE, GXPN. And then the final stage would be it's either OSEE. There are some that are purely situational. So for you to jumpstart your career, it's good that you look into the modules of the type of certification that you want and do a bit of self-study, or if you have a friend that has different materials for it that's not called dumps per se, then you can ask him for a bit of insight. So for me, it was when I was starting my penetration testing career, I did not have any other certifications. So I just studied and I was constantly playing Hack the Box way back starting around 2017. And then I met a lot of friends, etc. So I asked them for advice, and they said that uh, with the experience that I currently have, I can probably take OSCP, since all of the others are covering basic fundamentals. So that's what I did. I took OSCP afterwards, and then I took OSCE, and then OSWE. So my target next would be the final one in the OffSec arsenal if they do not release the new modules. So basically, each and everyone has a different roadmap for themselves. If you have any other questions regarding these are all viable certifications that you can take. Right, so that concludes my Pentest 101, and now is the time for questions. So,
Yeah, I'm right here.
yep.
Don't worry, Evan. I haven't left you behind alone. So I know it's quite. It took
It was
quite a
pretty
while.
quiet.
Yeah. That's the difference between webinar and Zoom meeting. So the tendency it becomes a bit quiet. Uh,
Yeah.
so anyone, for anyone, just please do put on your questions in there, and if you couldn't find the question and answer portion, uh, please do put it on chat. We'll be reading it. If you wanted to ask it over at Discord, that's still fine. So we got a question here from one of the attendees. Is it okay to take a CEH if I already have EJPT?
Yes, of course, it's okay to take CH if you have EJPT, because for one, if I'm going to go back on my security certification roadmap slide, you'll see that EJPT is just below CH. So CH also covers some aspects that EJPT does not. So you can actually cascade these and fill in the blanks, or fill in uh, the things that you do not you still don't know.
All right. So any other questions there? So we were able. How many certs will it take first to take OSEE? Care to answer that question,
For
Evan?
for OSEE, I believe it's most viable to take the previous offset courses first, because OSE is a combination of all of the above. So it's basically OSCP, OSWE, and OSCE for the preparation for OSE. Any other questions?
All right. So we got here another question. Are there any good OSINT certs beside SAN or SANS OSINT? Are they worth taking as a pen tester?
Okay, so for any good OSINT certs aside from Sans OSINT, I'm not sure at the moment because I haven't looked into it, but they are definitely worth taking if it's open source intelligence. So as a pen tester, you want to widen your arsenal in which information you're trying to gather. So these can add up to what you can scrape off the internet. Okay, so next question. How long have you been doing pen testing? Formally, it's about 4 years, but I've been doing pen testing for a total of 7 years, I think. Yeah, 7, almost going 8 years. So my experience has not been too long compared to other people, but rest assured that I put my passion and I put most of my time into filling in whatever field I am not most capable of. So I always strive to do my best.
Very well. All right, so we've got another question. What is your most recommended cert for starters? Like when you are new to pen testing field, what do we take first?
Okay, so if you're new to the pen testing field, well, what most people do right now is they usually do EJPT first, or you can have a boot camp training like the ones that are offered in if you're in the Philippines, the ones that are offered in Guide M. So those guys are pretty good. So it's either that or gear up to take EJPT and then work your way above.
All right, and then next is which is better on site, or is it on site or remote testing?
Okay, so this one is purely situational, I guess. It depends on what type of environment you're going to be testing, because there are some machines or some systems that are better tested on site to prevent additional problems, and there are some that can only be can be done via remote because you don't have to be physically there to be colluding with the staff, etc.
All right, very well said. I don't. So there's a couple questions coming in. Uh, Due to pandemic, how do you pen test internal networks remotely?
Okay, so due to the pandemic, how do you pen test internal networks remotely? I'm not sure if I can disclose, but you can probably set up a virtual machine. Uh, I'm not sure if people do that, but you can probably set up a virtual machine that points to a uh, IP address or a public IP address on your company or your company owns, and then uh, whitelist the IP address, etc. So you can ship them off a personally made virtual machine where your tools are there, and then it just connects to your central server or your company's server, so that you all can have access.
Right. Then, have you had any experience with blue teaming professionally, or did you just, jump into being just jump into a red hat job, red team job rather?
For me, I didn't actually have. I wouldn't call it blue tea. Actually, I think it is, but I started off with incident response, and then I eventually got off of that because I didn't really like uh, being on the other side. My passion was actually penetration testing and red team methodologies. So after I finished the my contract for the incident response job, I actively went and practiced penetration testing and uh, tried to roll my chances on landing a job that is fit for my field.
All right. So, any other questions? I believe we've got time. Car hacking village would be around 2000 hours. So we've got a couple of minutes to burn. Of course, we do understand. Despite this being virtual, we still do understand that you've got bio needs. So clock strike just recently at 5 p.m. If you all would like to jump out of the call for a while and then uh, take at least rehydrate or get something to snack on, or at least have your dinner before jumping back into the call, that would be really great. Uh, if you just wanted to wait into the call, keep yourself dialed in. That's perfectly all right. We'll be around. If you wanted to catch up with a couple of people that you could see are part of the attendance list, or you just wanted to put something in there or to chat about, Discord is open for you guys to chat on. Uh, and also for it's very much fun in RootCon when you network with people that's part of the attendees list. I'd rather, if I were in your shoes, I'd do that. I've know a lot of people here who's connected with different colleagues, both new and old. Uh, it's done wonders for them. So I'd encourage you to do the same. Uh, we'll be having quite a long break for about an hour and a half. Uh, so it's already 5. We'd be happy to meet you back online around 6:30. So if you don't have further questions, you could check on us. Oh, sorry. So merong pahabol or some questions just came up. Let's read them and then answer them before we go on break. Does company nowadays require certification like OSEE to be qualified for a higher position? That actually depends. I
Um,
could we yes, Eman, please go ahead.
yes. No, actually, I think it's better if you answer this because you have more experience than me.
All right. For companies nowadays, require certifications like OSEE to be qualified for higher positions. It actually depends. It depends if you're being hired externally or internally. If you're being hired externally and it's part of the requirements as listed, then it is a must to have it. But then again, like what Eman said in his slides and his talk, uh, this are certifications are just added as part of your repertoire. So, other question is, can you discuss a little bit about cyber kill chain, if possible? What tools do you need on those 8 phases? Eman, do you have any answers for this?
For if it's a cyber kill chain, then for me personally, I mostly use Cobalt Strike for my kill chain. So recon, etc. I have various tools. If it's weaponization, if it's weaponization command and control, for that mostly I have um, Cobalt Strike to work with. So Cobalt Strike is a great CNC. It also has malleable C2 profiles, so you can basically ship malware. You can also easily weaponize. So since it's an adversary emulation tool, it's pretty handy on easing up what tools you need for your kill chain.
Right, and then for the final question, would certs be enough than experience? So I could answer that for you. Of course, experience counts the best rather than certification. Again, I have nothing against certification. The root, us as an organization or an industry have nothing against certification. Yes, certification is really good to have, but then again, experience top it all, right? Certification can be coupled with theoretical learning, and then experience is coupled with actual application. So we vote experience number one, and then followed by certification. So hopefully we were able to answer that clearly. But that's just our preference. Again, it's all on you on how you pave your way or your journey as an infosec professional.
That's true. Experience tops certifications mostly because most people or a lot of people that don't have certifications are actually pretty skilled. So they just don't have the time and money to invest sometimes.
Right.
So
Or the
as
company
much
doesn't
as
have the
possible,
finances to invest.
yes, that's true.
Anyways, I hate to cut it short, but I'll be sending you all for an hour break, an hour and a half break. We'll meet you back around 6:30 in the afternoon, 6:30 tonight. That would be for the car hacking village. If you're still confused regarding the schedule, let me just grab the link right here where you could check our schedule for today and for the rest of the virtual conference. So let me just put it here. Uh, Here you go. So you can check the schedule right there. And we'll catch up with you around, sorry, I stand corrected, around 7:30. So that's a 2 hour and a half break. You want to do your bio break, you want to have dinner. I know y'all